The transfer portal is running wild right now, and I've got myself a little wish list of who I want to see in maroon and gold.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast. And stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back in. Today, we are going to be taking a look at the transfer portal, which, as we would expect, is running rampant right now. And thankfully, the Sun Devils have not been a victim of it so far, knock on wood here. But as of now, ASU has been able to keep their nose clean. The only player who has entered is defensive back RJ Reagan. He is someone that has been shuffled around in the depth on the team. I don't blame him. I think he's going to be looking for an opportunity to have significantly more playing time. So power to him, and best of luck to you, young man. I hope you're able to find what you're looking for. Now, for ASU, there is quite a few players that are in the transfer portal that I have a distinct interest in. If you're on YouTube, you can see my little wish list on the right-hand side of your screen. If you are listening, don't worry, I will fill you in. Now, the 5 guys that I am looking at here are all on the defensive side of the football. That is not really an accident, and it's also not an accident that it's really only 2 positions that I'm looking at here. Now, for full disclosure, there are plenty of players that I think ASU should be taking a look at. But for me, without knowing how ASU is really perceiving their roster right now, I am giving a very much outsider's perspective here. Now, I don't know how many true needs ASU has right now. There's plenty of areas that could be upgraded, but I look at this team and I don't know. I feel like for the most part, you have the depth throughout the roster. I'm not saying you have superstars everywhere, but I am saying that there's plenty of depth that makes it so you don't need to necessarily stress out about figuring out who is going to play what position, who's your depth chart going to be, and be actually concerned, because they already attacked the transfer portal to do that. They already added 20 players to the transfer portal during the offseason. They got cornerbacks. They got offensive linemen. They got more offensive weapons. They have already been aggressive in adding to this roster. So whether or not ASU continues to be aggressive, I don't really know. And even if they are aggressive, my questions are, where will they be aggressive at? I know a lot of people will say the offensive line. I don't know if that's necessarily true, though, because you do have lots of depth there. I mean, for what it's worth, you always want to stock the cupboards, but you've got a lot of interior guys you brought in, lots of guards. The tackles I'm not worried about with Emmett Boley back. Max Ian, I messed up his name. Ionaker. I still think I mispronounced that. Ioniker, I believe is how you say it. I need the double check. You got him. You got Sean Naa, who can move around. Bram Walden. Emmett Boley is back. I don't know that offensive line is necessarily the biggest weakness on this team right now. You could say adding more weapons. I don't really know. The only position on offense I would really think to add would probably be tight end. But you've already added guys through the transfer portal with Colson Arenz and Marqueston Douglas have been added. And Jaden Fortier is going to be here in the fall, and Bryce Pierre is here. You already have good quarterbacks, I would say. You got 3 guys on a scholarship plus Navi Bruzon. Offense feels good to me. Now, don't get me wrong, if they went for a guy like Damian Martinez, who is the former running back at Oregon State and a former first-team All-Pac-12 player who stole that spot from ex-Valade a couple of years back, neither here nor there, I wouldn't be opposed to it at all. But offensively, I don't know if there's really any spot that you need to truly attack. Defensively, I would argue there is one spot that you really, really need to put a lot of emphasis on right now, and that's the interior of the defensive line. You just lost Anthonie Cooper, who is a really good, versatile piece for you, but beyond him, there's definitely going to be some question marks on the team. And it's not as though they don't have players to plug in. I mean, Jeff Clark and CJ Fight could very much be the solution, at least for the team for further notice. You've got Sam Benjamin and Tristan Monday who can play on the inside. Harold Brooks Jr. is getting some opportunities. There are bodies along the interior of the defensive line, but I still think that they could stand for some upgrades. Linebacker, I think you're good. You brought in 3 transfers already. You still have Caleb McCullough. You still have Tate Romney, Crew Jackson, Kavian Thunderbird. Linebacker feels good. Defensive backs, I still feel pretty good. I would love to see more additions to the corner room. But again, you've already added a lot of guys. You added LaTerrence Welsh. You added Javen Robinson. You have guys returning at the corner spot as well. You've got a lot of young guys too. Rodney Bimmich, Tony Lewis and Cuba, Chris Johnson Jr., Plas Johnson. There's a lot of youth in the defensive secondary. Safety, you don't need a guy, for sure. That is the one position you do not need to address. You're almost too deep at safety. 2 as in TOO, not 2 the number. You're probably 3 deep. I mean, they're good at safety. But as far as like actual positions to fill, I think there's really only 2. That would be the interior defensive line, which I tell you, I do think you need to go out and get a guy, whether it's a big name or not so much. But I think you need to add another interior lineman and potentially corner, if for no other reason than to really kind of bolster up the back end and continue making yourself very talented, getting some younger guys as well, because there is 2 corners out there that very much interest me. Now that we have really established what I want to see, we'll go ahead and hop into the wish list that I have here. And we're going to break it up a little bit. We're going to take a look at the interior defensive lineman here in just a moment. And then we're going to take a look at the secondary and the corners that I have listed. And again, I don't necessarily see this as like, oh my God, they've got holes at these positions. I just see it as they need to take a look at adding more depth, more talent and whatnot. And the transfer portal absolutely provides that right now. And we'll talk about it in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift up your head, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. Smash the smash hit, the Smash mobile game, Monopoly Go. Lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly that you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players for rent for your iconic properties too. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put your game face on, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft and hear who the local experts are picking for every NFL franchise, from live reactions and college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is now available on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube and wherever you're getting your podcasts. Let's go ahead and jump right back into our conversation now and take a look at the players that I would like to see added to this team. Now, for what it's worth, these are definitely some shoot for the moon players, especially the first guy we're going to talk about. This is a 1 in a million chance here, but if you can land him, you got to do it. In case you are unaware, the former number 1 defensive back from the 2023 cycle entered the portal. He was the number 14 number 14 recruit in the nation, number 1 defensive back, like I said, number 4 in the state of Florida. I, of course, am talking about Cormani McClain. McClain originally committed to Colorado, did not get on the field as much as maybe we thought he would, and for whatever reason has opted to enter the transfer portal. Look, this kid is as talented as they come. There's a reason he was as coveted as he was coming out of high school. 6'2", 165. I believe he was rumored to be running a really low 4.3 in his 40 time. It's somebody that really just kind of piques your interest in more ways than one. And you're like, man, I would love to add this kid. He is got a ceiling as high as anybody else in the country here. He got to study under Deion Sanders for a year, and take that with a grain of salt. That doesn't necessarily mean that this kid is going to end up being a first-round pick in the NFL, but Deion knows what he's doing with defensive backs, and even 1 year of learning how to play the position at the next level, it gets my attention. But there's a few other things that this does for me too. There's a few other buttons that adding a Cormani McClain would do for me. First of all, that's star power. You add a guy like Cormani McClain, people are going to pay attention to you. People will take notice and they'll be like, holy cow, we can't really sleep on the Arizona State Sun Devils. They're adding a lot of talented players. They added former 5-star Raleek Brown. They added former very high 4-star Cole Martin. They have added former 4-star Sam Levitt through the transfer portal in one offseason. Now imagine you add another former 5-star in Cormani McClain. That sends a message to the country that, hey, there's something going on in Tempe, Arizona. There's clearly something in the water out there, and they're getting these kids to come in to commit and build something. This is a program that has won 6 games in the last 2 years, and yet there's guys who are coming to this program. Imagine what getting Cormani McClain would do for you. That is just the emphasis on we're building something. The problem is less than 1% chance. Honestly, I feel like going back to Florida makes too much sense to not happen. Being a Gator just kind of feels right for him. It wouldn't surprise me if he ended up there. I know that Florida was very much in pursuit of him. And for what it's worth, ASU did not offer him last year. Brian Carrington isn't following him on any social media platforms. So for all the conspiracy theorists out there, when it comes to that stuff, it's not there. I don't know that it will be there. He's a great player. He's a great talent. Less than 1% chance it happens. Next guy I want to mention is another defensive back before we flip over to the interior defensive line. That is going to be Tacario Davis. And if that sounds like a familiar name, it's because Davis is a former U of A Wildcat. We've already flipped one U of A kid. We already got ourselves Jacob Kongaika after he spent 2 years with the Wildcats. Why not get another guy who has spent 2 years down in Tucson? Get him to come to the good guys. He is, man, you can't teach size, right? He's got it. 6'4", 195, cornerback. That's pretty big, in case you were wondering. Because ASU had a guy just like that in Roe Torrance. Torrance was pretty good, in case you forgot. You are looking for his replacement right now. And you got some really talented kids. LT Welsh, Ed Woods, Javen Robinson, definitely the top 3 guys off the top of my head. You got all the freshmen. You've got some other guys that are returning, like Keontae Bradley. I know the team is very high on Keith Abney as well. But adding somebody that's got Tacario Davis's size, that's something that ASU doesn't necessarily have right now. They've got a bunch of 6-footers, but a 6'4" corner who can move, that's a rarity. You saw how pivotal a guy like Roe Torrance was. And part of that isn't even his size. Part of that is just because he's a good player. But to have somebody that can replicate what you can't teach is awesome. And it doesn't even mean he needs to be your number 1 corner. He can come in here and be a part of the rotation. Because right now I would expect that to be the case, is that Arizona State is going to be using a lot of rotation in their defensive backs. And with the safeties, they're going to move guys around. They're going to do it with their corners. Guys will be playing inside and outside. Safeties will be coming down. There's going to be all sorts of movement. So adding another body, that doesn't hurt you at all. Tacario Davis, someone who really interests me. And it also does a little bit for you in terms of, how would I word this? Stirring that rivalry up a little bit more. Not that you need it, but pulling Jacob Kongaika already got the attention of U of A fans. Can you imagine if you got another one in the same offseason, another starter in the same offseason? Just plucked 2 of their players, and now you have to play against them. That would be pretty good. And for what it's worth, as much as this pains me to say, they've been on the winning end of the last 2 territorial cups. I can't imagine they're trying to lose one in their time in college. I'm sure they'd love to go 3-0 or 4-0 or 5-0, depending on how much eligibility they have. So, and that's one more thing to mention here. His teammate, Jacob Kongaika, can recruit him, and he can convince him to come to Arizona State, to come to Tempe. He seems to like it here. The coaches very much like Jacob Kongaika. I have mentioned him before as someone that the coaches have said, hey, pay attention to Jacob. Look at what Jacob's doing. I want you to replicate this. Look at Jacob as the example. They like him here. And I'm sure that Jacob would love to get a former teammate of his up to Arizona State as well. Give him a little more familiarity as he continues to grow with this program. I don't know if I would give this a percentage. I don't know if I would really give any of these guys a percentage. Again, like I said with McClain, it's really like next to nothing. Tacario, of the 5 we're going to talk about, I think is the most realistic, but that doesn't mean much. I would love to see him added. There is one other player I think I would want more than him on the defensive line, and we're going to take a look at him and a couple other guys here in just one moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Wouldn't it be great if you could see your investment and retirement accounts in one place? Well, with Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They're the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at all the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analysis, ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of all your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the insight to look your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you find your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The #1 financial destination is yahoofinance.com. Again, that's yahoofinance.com. One more time, wherever you get your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. Stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils, and a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Wrapping up the episode now, defensive line. I have 3 guys that have absolutely piqued my interest. One of them we are very familiar with. That, of course, Jermayne Lole. And Lole was not just somebody that ASU was familiar with, but it is somebody who was very productive during his time at Arizona State. Lole, over 3 years from 2018 to 2020, when he was healthy and productive, posted 11 sacks, well over 100 tackles. He was someone who was just so versatile. A 6'3", 310-pound guy who could line up inside or outside. He was a stud, and at one point in time, he was on his way to the pros. Now, injuries have derailed that a little bit for him, and he is now going into his 7th season in college. But why not bring him home? Why not bring Lole back to where it all began? And for what it's worth, he has set up some, what are they called? Not appointments, visits with some teams, including Oklahoma and USC. ASU's not on there. I don't know if ASU will be on there. It'd be cool. I just don't know how realistic it is. It would be really poetic for him to come back to Arizona State for his last year of college, go out with a bang, go out where everything began. And who knows, maybe he gets back to the point that he was getting that conversation about a potential next level player. It would just be cool. Next guy I want to talk about, Bear Alexander. Alexander is another former 5-star player. Started his career at Georgia, moved to USC last year, and now is immediately back in the transfer portal. So I don't know if he's going to get slapped with the 2-time transfer thing. And that's the only thing that would concern me with adding Alexander. But this kid's a beast, man. 6'3", 300 pounds. Like I said, a former 5-star kid. Last year, he had 47 tackles and a sack and a half. He is certifiably good. I would love to see him at Arizona State. My only hang up is whether or not he'll be immediately eligible or if we're going to have to wait a while for him. But this is nonetheless someone that just immediately transforms your room. And you've got some very talented players on the defensive line right now. Alexander brings some youth, though. I believe he'll be a redshirt sophomore. If not, he'll be a junior. He'll have 2 years minimum. Might have 3. And it's a high upside kid. It's a kid that is so disruptive, and he's strong, man. He is a strong dude from the middle of the line. ASU needs somebody that can just absolutely take on double teams right now, but also someone that can generate some pressure, some sacks, and some really good production. I don't know that there is a defensive lineman out there right now that provides more of that than Bear Alexander does. He is at or near the top for me for players that I want. But the number one player who's got my attention, somebody that I don't know if he would consider Arizona State, but I would love if he did, is Damonic Williams. And Williams is a TCU transfer, 6'2", 320 pounds. He was one of their best defenders during their run to the national championship. He was a freshman all Big 12 conference player. He was really good last year too. 3 sacks last year. And again, this is a 6'2", 320-pound kid. So this isn't your 3-tech edge rusher. This is someone who can play inside. Now, we do have CJ Fite to play inside, but we don't really have anyone behind him. There's not a ton of big dudes on this team right now. It was one of the reasons why CJ had quite the advantage going into last year was he did stand out on the defensive line, if for no other reason than his size. Well, getting him a running mate, or at least somebody that can lighten the load a little bit, would be huge. Or God forbid, you put them both on the field at the same time. I mean, Williams has some pass rushing upside to him. CJ is somebody who is just able to eat up blocks, and I'm also interested to see if he can take the next step forward as a pass rusher. But Williams has absolutely piqued my interest here. If not for the name brand value of Cormani McClain, Williams would probably be my number one guy to go and get. Realistically, I'd probably put him number 2 behind Tacario Davis. He's someone that, unlike Tacario or Cormani, he could slide in and immediately start for you. He's got the starting experience since a freshman. And ASU is trying to figure out the rest of the defensive line now that Anthonie Cooper is out for most, if not all, of the year. Williams could just be slot and play. And it gives you youth. It gives you high upside. I would tell you between him, CJ Fite, Jacob Kongaika, and some of the other younger guys, I would like that. The idea of Williams and Fite on the same field at the same time is also really exciting. ASU could really turn into a good run defense team. Adding Williams would almost solidify that for me. So we'll end it like this. I'm going to do a ranking. I did not do a ranking previously. This is all going to be improv for me. We're going to do it with a combination of how realistic it is as well as how awesome it would be. So number 5, we're going to go Jermayne Lole. Lole, I feel, is very unrealistic, but man, would it be fun. Number 4, Cormani McClain, obviously the most talented kid here, but I don't know whether or not he would even consider Arizona State. Number 3, Bear Alexander, might be the most talented player of the 5 guys that I have listed here. Interesting to see what he values because he's won a national championship. USC had some good NIL opportunities. What's he looking for? Number 2, we're going to go Tacario Davis. We're going to stick with chalk and go Damonic Williams, number 1. I would be so over the moon if you got one of them or both of them. Those are 2 players that I think just bring so much to what you're trying to do for this year and potentially next year and maybe the year after that, depending on what their eligibility looks like. But those are 5 players that are on my list of a wish list. There's tons of guys. Again, I stuck to corner and defensive tackle. There are offensive linemen out there. There are receivers. There are running backs. There's everybody on the table. So if there's somebody you think I didn't give enough love to, hit me up. Let me know in the comments. You can You can at me on Twitter at RichieBrats36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. But wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to get an update whenever we post new content. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back again tomorrow as I round up Thursday's training camp for you guys, or practice, spring practice, I should say. We'll wrap it up for you. I'll let you know everything that I notice as we continue looking at Hines Ward, the quarterback battle, and more. I'll see you then. Till next time, you keep it locked right here on Locked On.